today. We are without a doubt racing for the memory of our beloved John Edwards.
Be all clear behind you. Coming back checker. Now that's an ass kicking.
Yeah, absolutely. This one's definitely for John.
And what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. I'm your host, Alex Daniels. Let's cover some racing news, some recaps, and a little bit of history in the end. This is going to be a two-parter on the history on this one, so this will be to be continued at the end of this. But let's kick it off with some race recaps. All right, we had Formula 1 in Bahrain. Lots of rookies in the first half of the FP1 on this one. Not a lot of real reading on the car performance, being that most were not going to be in the race anyway, and it was the F1 rookie extravaganza for the most part. But trying a few things. Ferrari had a new floor design they were testing, hoping to achieve a little more performance out of that. FP2, we saw Verstappen had a lot of trouble with suspension play. That ended up also coming into the races we'll talk about a little bit. Alonso had a steering wheel issue. There's a lot of weird little things like that. Electronics, steering wheels, all kinds of little things going wrong there for a lot of the boys there in FP2. During qualifying, Esteban Ocon loses it, turn 2 exit, ruining his second round of qualifying. Oscar Piastri ends up taking the pole. Verstappen not running his best, starting out in 7th. No surprise kind of how the race turned out on this one, but Piastri, who was also on pole, runs through the strategy, gets the race win. It appeared that nobody was really sure how the tire compounds were going to play out in this race. I'm not sure what the big hesitation was on that. Max opted for a different strategy and then was fighting his car quite a bit through it, so unfortunate for him and that team on how that worked, but not every week's going to be a perfect week. Overall it looked like good attendance in Bahrain. F1's, every time they're out there in the Middle East, they always get a ton of celebrities from that area and that part of the world and everything else, so a lot of folks showing up for that. Moving over to IndyCar, we had the 50th anniversary of the Long Beach Grand Prix. IndyCar at Long Beach is one of the most anticipated events of the year. It's probably second to the Indy 500. Qualifying was a little interesting, but not surprising. Andretti dominated all three cars in the Fast Six. The Andretti on street courses is something else, and I wish they could capitalize on it on other tracks. They've got a lot of good talent. Obviously, we've seen Herta have some problems this year on some things when he was fast. He should have won St. Pete and had issues. The real strange thing is that we didn't see much out of Penske. Once again, they're having a rough start to the season. One Penske car made it to the Fast Six, and that was Mr. Scotty Mack. You had the Andretti lockout on the front row, and just a mix of things going on there, but just interesting how that all kind of worked out for this one. The other strange thing with this is another caution-free event, which for Long Beach is super, super rare. Kind of expected thermal wouldn't be too exciting with cautions, but Long Beach caution-free. I don't know if this is just because the racing is a little more stagnant due to this hybrid era that we're in now, the weight of the cars and everything else. There was some good mid-pack battles. There was some good stuff that wasn't necessarily televised from the sounds of it, but overall, just a kind of a normal race. But it was good to see Andretti do domination. We thought for sure this was going to be another Alex Palou type deal. He'd won the first two races, but Kyle Kirkwood, who started on pole, ends up getting his second win in Long Beach, takes the win. I don't think he jumped in the fountain, but he said he was going to. He gets the win for Andretti and much needed momentum for that team and what they've got going on. So that was really good to see. Congrats to them. And the 50th anniversary. It's pretty cool seeing a lot of the previous winners there as well and the 50th anniversary stuff. And I'm really hoping I can put that. It's a bucket list event for me, and I'm hoping we can figure it out. All right, let's move over to the NASCAR weekend at Bristol. We saw this was going to be another triple attempt by Kyle Larson trying to make the trifecta, truck race, Xfinity, and the Cup race. Kyle Busch had done it twice previously in his career here at the old Bristol. So let's kick it off with the Truck Series race. Stage 1 had a late caution, brought out a one-lap shootout for the stage win. Chandler Smith was in the right place at the right time on that one, picking up important points on that stage win for him. Stage 2, pretty exciting. Bailey Currie ends up holding off the field, getting good strategy and getting a stage 2 win. This is his first career stage win, so pretty awesome to see that and everything for that team getting their first one. Let's talk about the finish. Towards the end of the race, we saw rain cautions. Didn't last too long, but did take up some time, took up some laps, and 14 laps left on the restart. Big mess Everybody's trying to go 3, 4 wide, do a bunch of stuff. Huge mess, pile up, ends up holding up the race some more. Get a nice shootout for the finish. Kyle Larson was right on Chandler Smith at the end, but he didn't have enough truck in it to get past Chandler Smith in that Front Row Motorsports team. They take the win, taking away the chance for the triple to happen for Kyle Larson, which is unfortunate because as we're about to cover, he had a great weekend for the rest of it. Jumping over to the Xfinity race, stage 1, Kyle Larson led the field to green, dominated the stage until a late caution shook up pit strategies. Even taking an early pit stop and allowing the field to catch up, he rolled into the second row on the restart, gave Sam Mayer the stage win, but Larson made up some good ground. Obviously, Larson's looking for a race win, not necessarily a stage win for points, not being a full-time Xfinity guy. So going into stage 2, now on his strategy, Kyle Larson dominates, passes half the field, gets a stage win, and then ultimately, through the end of it, pretty dominating day by Larson. He led over 270 laps and gets it done. He gets the race win there, making it a super dead blow that he didn't get the truck race win, but it is what it is. Also notably that Junior Motorsports dominated as well. They finished 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So had Larson not been in this race, they probably would have had a full podium of the JRM cars. So congrats to them and their efforts. Obviously, Xfinity's, they're kind of unstoppable, especially at these shorter tracks. Moving on from that, let's talk Cup race. I'm not even going to talk about the stages because Kyle Larson dominated everything. He won all of it. He led 80% of the laps, just pure dominance, just kicking everybody's ass out there. Nearly got himself the triple, but the second place finish in the truck race really ruined that for the weekend. But still, you can't be upset about it. Second place in the trucks, first in Xfinity, and first in Cup. So the next thing, let's talk about this Cup race is the tire situation. What are we doing with these tires? They said temperature was to blame. In practice, they're cording out in 30 laps. In the race, you can run the whole race on right sides. So what are we doing? I know everybody's up against a wall in this deal, but can a 15 to 20 degree swing in ambient temperature really completely change the compound of the tire? I mean, I'm not a tire scientist, obviously, but are we really on that fine of a line with this compound where, if there's overcast weather, the tires are gonna, run like shit, but if the sun's out, you're gonna run on them all day? Like, what's the deal with this Goodyear? I don't understand it. Makes the race at Bristol kind of a crapshoot, to be honest. You don't know what you're going to get. We know already that this next-gen car has issues with passing on these short tracks especially. You can arrow everybody out of the way. Obviously, Larson forgot about that part of it, but he was just next level. But overall, I mean, there was some good midfield battles and stuff, but not what it used to be. This car is just not built for these shorter tracks, which is unfortunate because, that's what a lot of this series is built on. So I'm hoping that they can just keep working towards it. I know Goodyear's doing what they can do, and they're kind of up against a wall on all of this, but yeah, something's got to change as far as that goes. Moving over to the Cars Tour at Bristol Motor Speedway. You had late models in this one featuring Dale Earnhardt Jr. himself. Inaugural Cars Tour running at this speedway. It's the first time there in Georgia. 125 lap shootout. We saw a few cars going out of bounds. We had the one that landed in the watermelon field next to the track. For those that don't know, at that place, there's no wall on the backstretch. So if you run out the line and run high, you end up in the field, and it's a watermelon patch. So it's kind of interesting, but yeah, it's definitely happened a couple times there before. Not with the Cars Tour, but with previous series. You had Tyrell and Hall, both race winners from this year, battling up front all race long. Connor Hall takes home the win. Unfortunately for Dale Jr., he was collected in a bad checkup. I think he was running 8th during the time, and just had nowhere to go. Smashed the front end of his car up a little bit, checking up. I don't know if they were starting in the wrong gear or what it was, because it was at a restart, but the field piled up real quick, and he was just in the middle of it, nowhere to go. But his sister car, the guy that drives for him, Connor Hall, takes the win. So overall, still a good day, but he did have to tear up a little bit of his race car, which is unfortunate. Moving over to USAC National Sprints at Lincoln Park Speedway. Kyle Cummins gets the race win, kicking off the season in the right direction. That was on Friday night. Saturday night, we went over to Lawrenceburg Speedway, Justin Owen Memorial Race. Justin Grant runs a solid race, gets his 7th win at Lawrenceburg. This one was an emotional win for him, winning the race in Justin Owen's memory. So let's take a couple clips of the race winners from the USAC series.
Yeah, it's big. It's really, really big. Did I tie Dave for here? Yeah, tie Dave for here, all-time win. I love Lawrenceburg Speedway, and that's special to me. But it's really special to win this race in Justin's memory. And I admittedly didn't know him very well, but I raced with him a lot down here back in the 40 car, and he was clearly special. As many people support this race, as many people turn out, and everybody doing things in his honor, and it shows how special of a person he was to so many people, and to win a race in his honor, and for his family, and they're all here. They support us. They're incredible. Have the strength to come out here and keep doing this. We appreciate them coming out. And
all right, and finally we had World of Outlaws at I-55, a great facility. Always exciting watching Outlaws there. Friday night feature, Carson Macedo gets his second race win of the 2025 season. Kid's unstoppable right now. Saturday night feature, it looked like he was going to go back-to-back. Carson Macedo was fighting, but Logan Short ends up getting the win on that one, holding him off, taking his first win of 2025. I think we're at 3 or 4 race winners now in the Outlaws for the season, so still getting multiple race winners, which is great. Still got a lot of stuff going on, but...
Wow, that was one of the funnest races I've run in a while. Honestly, when we pushed out onto the track, I thought it was going to rubber, really early in the race. It just was so clean, and the way they had the cushion and everything, I figured it would just rubber off our left rears. But it did, and I mean, the whole race was really good. It did a lot of slide jobs, a lot of moving around, and battling the 1S, the 2, the 2C. Really kind of over the 48 in the beginning. I felt like I was just in a battle the entire race, and it was a lot of fun. Hats off to Philip Dietz. I mean, what an incredible all-ball 41 car tonight. It was incredible to drive. Robbie McQuinn, Adam Zimmerman, they work really hard, and it feels good to reward them with a win. Logan was really good, in traffic. I didn't know what was better, sliding myself in 3 and 4 and getting to the grip, or running the top. I think there at the end, it just got so far to get to it and ledged up. Once you got to it, it would kill my run down the front stretch. So I tried to go to the top with like 7 or 8 to go and absolutely plugged it in the fence pretty hard. And then I was nervous. I was getting a flat, so I started sliding myself, and I knew there with the green-white checker, and I need to get up and make some momentum.
That's about it for the race recaps this week. We are off on Easter weekend here, not much going on, so we will probably skip next week's episode, but stay tuned for more of this one. We've got a couple more things to cover, some history, and we are also going to split this up into a 2-parter, so keep in mind you'll have to come back in a couple weeks for the second half of this history. But also, if you got a minute, go ahead and like, share, subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform, whatever you're listening onto it now. Don't forget the YouTube channel if you're not over there yet, Spotify, any of the other ones. But let's see if we can keep this thing moving and keep the momentum going upward on this. Not a big news week. This will be quick, but we did have a couple things to talk about. Sadly, we lost a long-standing member of the Hendrick Motorsports team in John Edwards. He will be greatly missed amongst the NASCAR community. Kyle Larson spoke after the truck race in Bristol about this, so let's take a minute to listen to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to really take a moment to think back to then, but I remember being happy having John, as my guy. I didn't know John before then, but I knew that he had a long career with Jeff, and Jeff is obviously a mega, star, so I felt like with everything that I had gone through in 2020 and the spotlight that I was going to be in 21, I was happy to have a guy with a lot of experience, although in a different kind of way, just experience that I could be around and give me some comfort, and he was definitely that. So like I said, we're going to miss him, miss him around the work environment, but more importantly, you miss him just as a friend, and so it's sad. It's definitely sad. It was a surprise. Still doesn't seem real, so it's kind of hard to grasp it all.
So I want to send our thoughts and prayers to John's family. It's kind of an unexpected, untimely situation, and he will be missed among the garages and among the leagues. So moving over from that, Catherine Legg is going to make a few attempts to run Xfinity Series later this season, as well as a few starts in the Cup Series with that ELF sponsor that she's got. So that's exciting to hear. She'll be making that start with Xfinity at Rockingham. In addition to that, they are working on an Indy 500 program, so she's going to fill up her calendar with some racing, which is great to see as one of the veterans of motorsport. And very successful in her sports car career and everything else, and just a great mentor and role model for ladies coming into motorsports. So congrats to her on knocking that deal out, and we wish her the best on that. All right, so let's move over to this history portion. So this week we're going to talk about Lotus and their attempts in Formula One, and we're going to cover a few decades worth of history here on this one, and then part 2 we'll end off with the newer history of the team. I'd like to thank Wikipedia for a bunch of this information and a couple other auto sports news, a couple other sites as well. So kicking off, Team Lotus was a motorsports sister company of English sports car manufacturer Lotus Cars. The team ran cars in many motorsports categories, including Formula One, Formula 2, Formula Ford, Junior Formulas. They did a short stint in IndyCar and some sports car racing. More than 30 years after its last race, Team Lotus remained one of the most successful racing teams of all time. They won 7 Formula One constructors titles, 6 driver championships, and the Indy 500 between 1962 and 1978. Under their founder and chief designer, Colin Chapman, Lotus was responsible for many innovative and experimental developments, which have been critical to motorsport over the years, both in technical and commercial type situations. The Lotus name returned to Formula One in 2010 as Tony Fernandes' Lotus Racing Team. In 2011, the Lotus's iconic black and gold livery returned to F1 in Lotus Renault GP Team, sponsored Lotus cars, and in 2012 the team was rebranded completely as the Lotus F1 team. So that's kind of a good overview of what we're going to talk about. Let's cover it starting with the 1950s. Colin Chapman established Lotus Engineering Ltd in 1952 in Hornsey, United Kingdom. Lotus achieved rapid success with the 1953 MK6 and the 1954 MK8 sports cars. Team Lotus was split off from Lotus Engineering in 1954. A new Formula 2 regulation was announced for 1957, and in Britain, several organizers ran races for the new regulations during the course of 1956, kind of as a testing ground. Most of the cars that entered that year were sports cars, and they included a large number of Lotus 11s. The definitive Coventry Climax powered sports racer led by the Team Lotus entries for Chapman, driven by Cliff Allison and Reg Burkle. The 1955 Lotus MK9s, Lotus 11 cars were also seen at the Le Mans 24 Hours in 1956. When the Lotus 12 came out the next year, they were running one of them in 1958 when Allison won the F2 class and the International Trophy at Silverstone, beating the Cooper team and turning what they had on the track into a Type 14 Lotus, which was a production version of the original Lotus Elite, which won 6 victories, plus the Index of Performance several times at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So a lot of success right out of the gate for them in the late 50s as they were coming out, reaching out into the racing world and becoming a commercial producer of vehicles. What really got them started was when they decided to change engine sizes in 1952 to a 2.2 liter motor over there at Coventry Engines. You also saw the Lotus 12s run at Monaco in 1958 for Graham Hill and Cliff Allison. And then after that, they were replaced by the Lotus 16s. So in 1959, where the engine size had been stretched up to a 2.5 liter inline Formula engine rule, adapting type engine, Chapman continued with the front-engined F1 cars, but achieved little success. So in 1960, Chapman switched to the mid-engine Lotus 18. By then, the company had grown and expanded out of its original shop and moved it to Cheshunt, United Kingdom from there. So that brings us to the 1960s and 1970s. The first Formula One victory for Lotus came when Innis Ireland won the 1961 United States Grand Prix. A year earlier, Sterling Moss had recorded the first victory for a Lotus car at Monaco in his Lotus 18, entered by the Rob Walker Racing Team. There were successes in Formula 2 and Junior Formula. The road car business was doing well with the Lotus 7 and the Lotus Elite. And this was followed by the Lotus Elan in 1962, another street model car. More racing success followed with the Model 26R, which was the racing version of the Elan, and in 1963 with the Lotus Cortina, which Jack Sears drove to the British Saloon Car Championship title, which was repeated by Jim Clark in 1964 and Alan Mann in 1965 in the European Touring Car Championship. So we also saw other models entered in the 60s, including the Lotus 49 and the Lotus 77. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't understand how their number system is working for these chassis, but it is what it is. In 1963, Clark drove the Lotus 25 to a remarkable 7 wins in the season and won the World Championship. And the 1964 title was still for the taking by the time the last race was in Mexico, but problems with Clark's Lotus and Hill's BRM gave it to Ferrari. However, in 1965, Clark dominated once again, 6 wins in the Lotus 33, giving him another championship. Just having Jim Clark behind the wheel of this is part of their success, I'm sure. Amazing race car driver. While very innovative, Chapman also came under criticism for the structural fragility of his designs. So real weak chassis is how we're basically going to describe that. The number of top drivers seriously injured or killed on a Lotus machine was considerable, notably Sterling Moss, Alan Stacey, Mike Taylor, Jim Clark, Mike Spence, Bobby Marshman, Graham Hill, Joan Rindt, and Ronnie Peterson. All did wonderful things for Lotus, but Lotus paid them back in the safety aspect of not saving them. There was a lot of structural failures in those cars, as quoted in Dan Gurney's speech one time. Said, did I think the Lotus way of doing things was good? No. We had several structural failures in these cars, but at that time, I felt it was a price you paid for getting something significantly better. So faster, lighter weight, but with that became the danger factor of it, right? So it took a lot of drivers out of their careers. When Formula One engine sizes increased to 3 liters in 1966, Lotus was unprepared and kind of caught with their pants down, partly because they had a flat 16 project that was 1.5 liters. That was a huge failure. A lot of money tied up into that prevented them from really developing any kind of success with a 3-liter successor. They started the season fielding a 2-liter version of their FWMV V8. Say that 5 times fast, only switching to the H16 engine by the time they hit the Italian Grand Prix that year. With the new engine proving to be heavier and unreliable, they ended up doing a switch to the new Ford Cosworth DFV, designed by a former Lotus employee in Keith Duckworth in 1967, and the team started winning again. So a little struggle there in 66 with the rule changes on engines and what they were able to accomplish. Although they failed to win the title in 1967, by the end of the season, the Lotus 49 and the DFV engine were mature enough together. They had it figured out. They made the Lotus team dominant again. However, in 1968 season, Lotus lost its exclusive right to use the DFV engine from Ford, which was unfortunate because they had a great season opening at the 1968 South African Grand Prix. Lotus destroyed everybody in the competition, with Jim Clark and Graham Hill finishing first and second. This would be Jim Clark's last win. On the 7th of April 1968, Clark, who was one of the most successful and popular drivers of all time, was killed driving the Lotus 48 at the Hockenheimring in a non-championship Formula 2 event. It was later in 1968 they started adding the aero packages to copy the Chaparral sports car and run a wing on the Formula 1 car. Colin Chapman introduced modest front wings and spoiler on Hill's Lotus 49B at the 1968 Monaco Grand Prix. Graham Hill won the F1 World Championship in 1968 driving the Lotus 49 with the new aero package. So they did find some success. Unfortunately, that was post Jim Clark's passing that year. Started getting their feet under him in Formula 1 again. Around the same time, Chapman moved Lotus to a new shop in Norfolk. The factory was built on site, which was an old bomber base with old runways, which they converted into a testing facility. They had themselves a new test facility, which was great. In 1969, the team spent a lot of time experimenting with a gas turbine-powered car with four-wheel drive. All this was unsuccessful testing, especially as every race was dry. Trying to do an all-wheel drive type deal just didn't work for them. They came out with the new wedge-shaped Lotus in 1970, calling it the Lotus 72. The new Lotus 72 was very innovative, had torsion bar suspension, hip-mounted radiators, inboard front brakes, overhanging rear wing. The 72 had suspension problems out of the gate, but ended up getting lucky and getting a win in Monaco with it. Once they worked out all the suspension stuff, that car showed its superiority, and they dominated the championship the rest of the time until Johan Rindt, who was their driver at the time, was killed at Monza when the brake shaft broke. Rindt had only recently begun to wear a shoulder harness but refused to wear crotch straps because he felt they slowed his exit from the car in the event of a fire. The car hit the barrier head-on. Rindt submarined forward and the lap belt inflicted fatal head and neck injuries. Unfortunate, again, another driver of Lotus getting killed. The rest of the 1970 season was a real close one as Ferrari closed in on the undefended lead. This is where Emerson Fittipaldi came in 1970 and won the U.S. Grand Prix. He was a rookie that year, made his debut in that Lotus 49 and sealed the championship for Lotus and Rindt, who became the only man in history to win the world championship after passing away. Lotus's 1971 experiments did not bring any serious advance in technology. They did allow Chapman to test several drivers. For 1972, the team focused again on the Type 72 chassis, with Imperial Tobacco continuing to sponsor the team. And then they started running that black and gold livery that they were famous for a long time, and probably the best to run a sponsor of that era too. They had a great sponsorship program. You know, they were the first to really design liveries around the brand that they were, sponsored by. We had Emerson Fittipaldi driving for him in 1972. He became the youngest world champion in history, winning the championship in 1972. They also won the manufacturer's title for the sixth time in 1973. The Model 72 raced in Formula One for 5 years, proving it was a very successful design. They did start testing a Lotus 76, which was not nearly as successful. It was finally retired at the end of the 1975 season, and the Lotus 77 was prepared for the 76 season. The first ever Formula Ford car was built around the Formula 3 Lotus, the Type 51. Formula Ford, being a more spec series for up-and-coming drivers, completely based around the chassis that Chapman had designed. Chapman also had success at Indianapolis with the Lotus 29, winning the Indy 500 in its first attempt in 1963 with Jim Clark behind the wheel, which was kind of the beginning of the end for old front-engine race roadsters. You went back to rear and mid-engine cars from there. Many of Chapman's successes came from the innovation of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The Lotus 25 was the first monocoque chassis in Formula One, basically unibody design. The 49 was the first car to use the engine as a stressed member of the suspension and the chassis, so making the power to weight ratio way more centered. The Lotus 56 Indy car was powered by a gas turbine engine. It was fitted out with four-wheel drive. The Lotus 63 was the first mid-engined F1 car to race with four-wheel drive. The Lotus 72 broke new grounds for its aerodynamic packages. Just tons of innovation from Chapman as the designer and team boss. A couple more things they accomplished in the 70s. 1973 Spanish Grand Prix. Team Lotus, as a constructor, became the first constructor to achieve 50 Grand Prix victories. Ferrari was the second constructor to do so, having won their first Formula One race in 1951, but 7 years before Lotus even entered the Formula One Constructors' Championship. In the mid to late 1970s, Lotus experienced a resurgence with Mario Andretti joining the team. This came about the morning of the 1976 U.S. Grand Prix at Long Beach, which we just had the Long Beach weekend, when Andretti's VP Jay Parnelli had proven uncompetitive. Bob Evans did not qualify his Lotus, and Gunnar Nilsson in the other Lotus 77 qualified 8th, only to fall out with a suspension failure before completing a lap. Chapman and Andretti ran into each other at a hotel coffee shop that morning after the race and decided to join forces. Andretti's development expertise helped give new life to the then dying Lotus 77. Engineers began to investigate aerodynamic ground effects. The Lotus 78, when the Lotus 79 were extraordinarily successful with these new ground effects. With Mario Andretti winning the F1 World Championship, Lotus attempted to take ground effects further with the Lotus 80 and the Lotus 88. The team developed an all-carbon fiber car, the Lotus 88, in 1981. We're talking a lot of innovation here. The 88 was banned from racing for its twin chassis technology, where the driver had separate suspension from the aerodynamic parts of the car, so it would keep the car and keep the driver more centered in the car, which they wanted it all to be unison. McLaren's MP41 beat the all-carbon fiber car at the race. Chapman was beginning to work on active suspension development program when he died of a heart attack in December of 1982 at the age of 54. So a lot of innovation, a lot of success, a lot of things for Team Lotus in the first few years of their development. I should say few decades, not a few years. from the late 50s to the 60s to the 70s. So join us next time. A couple weeks from now, we're going to release part 2, and we will cover the history of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s of Team Lotus, and when they tried to come back in the early 20-teens. So as always, please, again, like, share, subscribe, do all this stuff. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, you name it. We were on TikTok for a little bit. We'll get back on there. Had some issues with it. Who knows if that's even going to stay around anyway, but just join us for anything you can with that. We appreciate it. Appreciate you following along and listening. And as always, stay safe, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us at Historic Hot Laps on X and all your other social platforms for the latest updates and sneak peeks into upcoming episodes. You can reach out to us directly at historichotlaps@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, questions, comments, opinions, and additional subject matter you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in.